Honestly, this entire proceeding is a joke. You think these charges will stick? You're wasting my time.
The law is for the poor. The words shattered a peaceful courtroom as Richard Grayson, who was grinning from one phone call to another, spoke. Judge Frank Caprio slowly wrote down the words. "You just put yourself under it," he said. 5 seconds later, the judge responded with clemency. The courtroom remained unmoved. The air was stagnant, and the feeling of entitlement always seemed to fade away. Lucas looked up from his phone and realized that nobody was laughing. The narrator adds that in that moment, wealth came with jurisdiction and jurisdiction didn't blink. If you're over 40 and still have faith in justice, please let us know where you stand. And remember, honoring someone doesn't require a high price. Miss Ray phoned case number 225T88,821 and detailed charges of reckless driving, verbal harassment, and disregard for citations. The total base fine was $940, with Lucas yawning. He leaned over to his lawyer and whispered, "That's brunch for $900. Judge Caprio looked at his mouth, saying, "Pause, you're learning so slowly." The narrator replies, "Okay, so there are times when the truth comes out of your paycheck, but you never know until you get the money." Miss Reyes made a last-minute change to the file. She had previously received an administrative alert for unlawfully parking in the fire lane outside Atlas Federal Bank headquarters 6 months ago. However, the alert had been invalidated after contacting someone on the phone. No one was calling back at present. On March 22nd, Officer Raymond Morneau, a 47-year-old who had served on the Providence force for 18 years, was decorated twice for community service and had 3 children, claimed that he had stopped and clocked someone driving 65 mph in southwestern neighborhoods near Roger Williams Park. The silver Audi sedan had cut off another car at an intersection, forcing the driver to stop. After turning on the lights, Officer Morneau pulled over and asked for Richard Grayson's license and registration. Lucas looked at him and said, "My father has half of your paycheck." He explained the citation and proceeded to take the license, which he then torn in several places and threw the pieces onto the sidewalk. He proceeded to say, "Write another one if it makes you feel powerful," as recorded by the body cam audio, and drove away at high speed. Judge Caprio remained silent. Officer Morneau's final statement revealed that the line had cost him more than any ticket. The narrator believes that every privilege is hidden behind a joke until it is called by its real name. In this courtroom, names were being written into the record. Lucas leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "This is a miscommunication, but I didn't make any threats. I was just being courteous. My father's bank utilizes municipal bonds to pay our city salaries. We're just partners in this relationship." Judge Caprio chose not to speak up. He argued that the bank's provision of payroll doesn't equate to reverence and cannot undo evidence. Miss Reyes provided the judge with a printed timeline from the body cam footage. At 2:47 p.m., the timestamp is displayed and the driver is cited, splitting the ticket in half and leaving the scene at high speed. The narrator notes that arrogance leaves a time mark. Precaution is not the enemy of denial. Miss Reyes stood up. She stated that the clerk's office had made contact with several individuals from Atlas Federal Bank within 2 hours of the traffic stop. In her testimony, she analyzed the log. At 3:05 p.m., the legal office of Atlas Bank was contacted. At 3:17, an assistant to Richard Grayson, CEO, left a voicemail that said, "This ticket doesn't reflect well on our institution. We'd rather settle this matter quietly before it becomes part of the public record." Later, at 3:12, an email was sent to the city attorney and clerk's office by the same person, directed by Judge Caprio, requesting that the citation be checked for ambiguity and Miss Reyes to play some of her voicemail. The tone was professional, measured, and unambiguously thought-provoking. "We understand these situations can be resolved in secrecy. Mr. Grayson would appreciate a discussion before this progresses further." The judge nodded, remarking, "Influence attempts are receipts of fear, and fear always leaves paper trails." According to the narrator, when power picks up the phone, all calls and emails, along with every carefully worded request, become evidence of intent. The next person to testify was Patrick Owens, a 68-year-old man who had retired from the Navy after 22 years of service and struggled with driving due to arthritis. He explained that he was struck by the silver sedan that had pulled up at the intersection near the park on March 22nd and was driven eastbound on Elmwood Avenue. He would break glass. His medication bottles, which were sitting in the passenger seat, spilled onto the floor. He stopped the car and watched as the police lights went off. He didn't think much of it until the clerk called him and asked if he could give a statement. He responded with yes and proceeded to express his gratitude. "Your Honor, I want to acknowledge your neighbor, Officer Morneau. It's been about 7 years since I last saw my neighborhood, and a lot of people were displaced from their homes. Officer Morneau was taken away and his wife fell ill. The cost of medical care was high." The courtroom remained silent as Judge Caprio leaned forward while the bank foreclosed on them, and they missed some mortgage payments. "Does that statement hold true? Officer Morneau was taken away from his residence by the defendant's father." Patrick Owens nodded. "Yes, you are honorable. I observed them as they packed and aided in the transportation of boxes. Officer Morneau was a good match. He did not voice any complaints. He relocated his family and continued with his duties." Lucas's expression altered. The smirk waned. It appeared as though he was paying attention for the first time. The narrator recounts that the institution that mailed his checks had also evicted another person. The two men were present in the same room, and Lucas believed they could split it in half. Judge Caprio looked at Lucas. "The man you ridiculed lost his home to the same bank, your father's bank, and lived next door to him, but he didn't let his past affect his treatment of you. Is that what you're trying to say? Did you realize how nice a man can be?" After 5 seconds, Lucas didn't respond, and then he quietly replied, "I didn't know." Judge Caprio nodded and acknowledged the problem. The narrator asserts that the law is meant for individuals who are not required to think about it. He also notes that justice can be overwhelming and undeniable in the space where arrogance once existed. If you think humility can alter everything, take a moment to acknowledge the power of principle. Judge Caprio's ruling was based on this observation. He presented a systematic list of evidence, including body cam footage from the traffic stop, verbal cues, and the destruction of the citation. Additionally, witness statements from Officer Morneau and Patrick Owens were presented, along with text messages sent to Lucas's phone 14 minutes after the stop stating that, "Don't worry." Atlas Federal Bank representatives made 3 attempts to reach the court. Judge Caprio stated that there is no controversy surrounding the evidence, but the issue is whether the individual comprehends the seriousness of their actions, as they did not just violate traffic regulations, but ridiculed the entire process. You tried to use your father's power to eliminate responsibility, and you did so in front of a man who had lost everything to the institution you believed would protect you. He imposed the full fine of $940, but he stayed with $450 of it, with condition that Lucas completes it within 6 months. The conditions were specific. Lucas would formally apologize to Officer Morneau and Patrick Owens, complete 120 hours of community service with the Providence Veteran Assistance Coalition, and record a public service announcement titled "Respect has no income bracket" for publication on the court's platform and for distribution to local media. Additionally, he would write and publish at least 2,000 words of reflective essay on subject matter, privilege versus principle. The tone of Judge Caprio remained unfazed. "Mercy is not a reward," he explained, adding that Lucas was left with an unremorseful debt that couldn't be settled by using credit cards. Nevertheless, prosecutors continued to discuss the larger context of the case. "This is a clear indication of systemic flaws," he declared. He will propose 3 policy changes to the City Council, the Municipal Court Administration, and the state legislature. The first is the establishment of an official public influence log. All communications made by any financial institution, corporation, or affiliated party regarding pending municipal cases must be recorded and released weekly thereafter. Second, requiring conflict disclosure. It is mandatory for any city employee, contractor, or official who has a financial relationship with someone in the case to disclose that information or recuse themselves from involvement. Furthermore, an officer must be shielded from professional retaliation if he or she reports any pressure, intimidation, or attempt to influence someone. He responded by saying, "We can't stop pressure. We can force it into the sun." The disinfectant that keeps power in check in the dark is transparency. It took 10 weeks for Lucas to finish his community service with the Providence Veteran Assistance Coalition. He was assigned to intake coordination, which involved sitting across from veterans who were facing eviction notices for being denied benefits or struggling with medical debt they couldn't afford. During his initial encounter with Carlos, a Marine Corps veteran who had served 2 tours in Iraq and returned to Providence with PTSD and an unaffordable mortgage. The bank foreclosed on Carlos, and he lost his home, savings, and sense of security, but Lucas listened intently and didn't interrupt. He didn't provide answers, but listened. That evening, he began writing his apology to Officer Morno, which was 2 paragraphs long and polite. Janet, his supervisor at the coalition and a woman with 30 years of experience in veteran advocacy, read it and returned it. "This sounds like a corporate memo," she remarked. "Write it again and put it in the right context." Lucas did the same. The second rendition was lengthier, less refined, and truthful. He stated that he had used his father's name as a shield, made fun of Officer Morno for carrying out his responsibilities, but had not yet fully grasped the significance of losing something that was unavoidable. According to him, it was not because the court required him to repay him. They met in person and Lucas presented him with the letter, despite their lack of white uniforms. After reading it silently, Officer Morno folded it and placed it on the table. He stated that he was the first person to apologize for something that was done by my bank, not yours. "The person I trusted, who sent me letters and envelopes I was afraid to open, nodded his head in agreement. He didn't attempt to explain the mechanics of foreclosure or the lending process. "Now I know, but you should have done it," Officer Morno replied. The narrator clarifies that accountability is not a transaction. It's a realization that the person in front of you is as significant as you are, and their pain doesn't disappear just because you caused it. Lucas completed 120 hours. After that, he began attending financial literacy classes to teach veterans how to read loan documents, spot predatory clauses in documents, and advocate for themselves. He even spent one afternoon sitting with an elderly man named Thomas, who was attempting to avoid foreclosure on his long-term home. Thomas was left behind after his wife's cancer treatment, which had drained their savings. The bank, not Atlas, but a competitor, was pursuing repossession. Lucas phoned the bank to clarify the situation. He arranged a forbearance plan. When Thomas's house was spared, he shook his hand and said, "You didn't have to do that." Lucas responded by stating that growth rarely posts well on social media, but it occurs in the still quiet moments when you choose to help. The public service announcement took 3 attempts. The first draft was scripted, overproduced, and hollow, which his supervisor rejected. The second version was better, but still careful and protective of the family name. Lucas rewrote it a 3rd time. The narrative was uncomplicated as he addressed a simple background, stating, "Luke is my father's name, and I'm the CEO of the bank." I thought it indicated that I didn't have to adhere to the same rules as everyone else. I was incorrect in my decision. I informed a police officer that my father possessed half of the money, and I railed against the law because I believed I would be exempt from punishment if I had more money. It's not appropriate. There is no income level involved. Respect isn't something you receive or invest in. You earn it by showing up, listening, and acknowledging your mistakes. I'm still learning. If you think your money and reputation outweighs the demands of your job, you're just a different person. The truth is that the law will eventually listen to you. After being published, the video was viewed over 100,000 times in just 3 weeks, and although many people were supportive, others were skeptical or angry. Lucas read all of them, but he didn't respond. Patrick Owens received his apology through mail. The 3-page handwritten note was written by Lucas, apologizing that he had cut him off, put him in harm's way, and neglected the humanity of men like him and Officer Morno, and wrote, "In 10 weeks of community service, I learned more than I had learned in 4 years of college." Patrick called the court back and left a message. Apologies are acceptable. Recommendations to continue aiding individuals are a valuable way to maintain one's reputation. Lucas submitted his reflection essay of 2,300 words on the last day. He expressed his thoughts on privilege, the covert benefits he had taken for granted. He came to the realization that the law was the only factor that made a society habitable for those without them, despite his initial belief that it was for the poor. The law, in my opinion, is aimed at people, not the peasant. Period. It's the structure that keeps the strong from crushing the weak. Officer Morno could stop me even though my father is in charge of a bank. I'm writing this instead of pretending nothing ever happened. I perceived wealth as a form of freedom, and I've since rediscovered its significance. Judge Caprio read the entire essay, and Lucas returned to the Providence Municipal Court 6 months later. He arrived by himself with no legal counsel, no father, and no staff available. Miss Reyes referred to him. Judge Caprio reviewed the compliance report. The essay was filed and distributed, and the judge read out the final line after completing all 120 hours and accepting 20 more. I claimed that the law was only appropriate for those with a bad character, but he was not. The item is intended for individuals. After examining it, it becomes apparent why it is valuable. He waived the remaining portion of the fine, but he added a caveat. Lucas quietly agreed to donate $500 to the Providence Veteran Assistance Coalition in Officer Morneau's name, prompting Judge Caprio to dismiss him. The narrator explains that Richard Grayson came to the court thinking the law was optional and that he didn't need to pay for it, but rather his weight, which is a result of carrying arrogance for an extended period, causing him to lose his mind and become even more emotionally complacent. This is not the first time that this has happened. He left with the understanding that the law is the only thing that can make people like him in a society where everyone else is important. Judge Caprio did not shout, lecture, or shame him. He exhibited a mirror and asked Lucas to observe his ignoring, and his response was simple. Let's just look and let humility take its place, as we had been feigning arrogance for most of our lives, not the hours that have passed, but the hour that has passed. A note card was written by Judge Caprio and left on his desk before he left chambers that afternoon. It contained a message that continued. The camera of the mind lingers on the empty bench, the silent courtroom. This is the place where a young man discovered that respect is not an innate trait. It has been demonstrated in small increments. Should every courtroom teach people humility as much as law? Please share your thoughts below. If you miss Judge Caprio and think that only fairness is worth preserving, dramatization is a valuable tool for storytelling and education, not legal advice or reporting.